Just try to imagine this. A young woman run down by a drug-crazed car thief. She suffers terrible head injuries and is left with permanent brain damage. And the thief? Well, according to the court, not guilty. It wasn't his fault. The drugs were to blame. And don't think this was a one-off case. There's a potentially dangerous loophole in the law, and it works like this. In more and more cases, zonked out crooks are claiming they had a psychotic episode triggered by alcohol or drugs. And so they end up in hospital, not jail. Or sometimes they just walk free. It's becoming an all too frequent confrontation for police. A psychotic individual, armed and dangerous, and fueled by amphetamines. What does this drug do to the mind?
People will go mad, if you like. They'll develop hallucination and delusion. The greater the dose, and particularly if you're using the drug intravenously, the greater the likelihood that you will experience madness.
Get out of the road, mate. Jump out of the road or smash me in the head.
On the Gold Coast, a young service station attendant finds himself at the wrong end of Stephen Brett's drug binge.
I'll burn the place.
He was saying stuff like, I'm going to kill you sort of thing. At the very end, I believe that I was going to get hit over the head with that hammer.
He told you you were going to die?
Yeah, I started to believe him.
When Jason Johnson saw his chance, he took it.
And then he said, that's it, it's time to die. And he raised his hammer back above his head, and I just instinctually jumped up. I don't even know where the hammer went. I must have knocked it out. And then while all this was going on, the police busted through the doors.
This would have to be one of the worst experiences you've ever had.
The worst.
Stephen Brett turned out to be a long-time crim with a bad drug habit. He claimed he was suffering an amphetamine-induced psychosis. The judge agreed, and for a string of fraud, theft and assault charges, handed Brett a 2-year sentence suspended to just 8 months.
I think he gets out in a couple of weeks, and that's not going to make my life any easier knowing that he's out there.
This is a scam being used by criminals and their lawyers. It's so simple and so wrong. Offenders pleading not guilty to their brutal crimes on the grounds that the drugs they took sent them insane. It's a loophole being exploited by criminals to get a brief stay in a psychiatric ward or to simply walk free. Does that mean there are people getting away with serious offences when they're not really mentally ill?
Yes. In layman's terms, somebody with a blood alcohol of 0.3 is probably insane, but they aren't given the benefit of these insanity defences, and I can't see why we'd use a separate kind of application of those rules in relation to amphetamines.
As the doctor in charge of the high security unit at Queensland's biggest psychiatric hospital, Bill Kingswell has had enough. He's outraged that some violent offenders are claiming a drug-induced psychosis when all they are really suffering is the predictable effect of dangerous drugs.
Amphetamines very clearly produce what we recognise as psychotic symptoms, hallucination, delusion, thought disorder and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a mental illness. If you recover from that within a reasonably short period of time, you have not got a mental illness.
Amphetamines have become the fastest growing drug trade in Australia. Amphetamines are stimulants, they're cheap and they're easy to produce. It's a drug that can be pretty much homemade.
It's something that they call the boot lab, and you just need some fairly basic ingredients and you can pretty much cook it in a hotel room.
For tens of thousands of young Australians, they're party drugs. For a few, like Graham Lomas, on a weekend bender last year, they can spark an uncontrolled, brutal rampage. Lomas started to hallucinate. He thought people were chasing him. And that's when his drug-crazed fantasy intersected with the real life of a young woman named Maria Gallo. Maria was a childcare worker who, on this night, had been having dinner with a friend at Sydney's Broadway Centre.
I heard a lady cry out for help, someone help, he's trying to steal a car.
Maria had left her car running to return a parking card to her friend when Graham Lomas emerged suddenly from the darkness and forced his way into the car.
I saw a young lady standing on the far side of the car, struggling with someone inside.
Stop! Get away! It's my car! Get out of here!
Arash Saladini was heading back to his own car after a night at the movies.
As I approached, he tried to make an escape by backing into Greek Street, and she sort of ran with the car, and as he stopped and started going forward, she fell and hit her head on the pavement.
In what would be Maria's only stroke of luck, Arash Saladini turned out to be a doctor and immediately began emergency first aid. Did you think that she could die?
Yes, and had the ambulance not arrived in time, then she was in mortal danger.
The car was later recovered at Ashfield, but not before it was detected by security cameras driving past.
As he's driven off, he's caused horrific injuries by running her over.
Michael Polito is Maria's cousin. Maria was in a coma for some time.
She was. We were told to prepare for the worst.
What was the worst?
What you don't want to hear. Death.
For 3 days, as Maria fought for her life in intensive care, police hunted her attacker. They matched fingerprints on Maria's car, and Lomas was arrested. What were your first memories after the attack?
Well, 5 weeks of my life has been gone. And I remember waking up in an ambulance with my mother and asking her what has happened, and she said, nothing has happened. You were in a little car accident and we're going to a hospital.
Graham Lomas told the court that his drug binge had triggered a dormant psychotic illness, even though he had no previous psychiatric history. 2 psychiatrists, hired by the defence, backed his story, and the judge agreed. Lomas was found not guilty on the grounds of mental illness. It's a great defence when all else fails.
If you're faced with a charge that you can't otherwise defend, you'd be insane not to pursue this avenue.
For Maria Gallo, now permanently brain damaged, it's impossible to comprehend. And no wonder. It's a concept of justice that would confound most of us. Do you accept at all, as the court did, that your attacker was of unsound mind at the time?
No, because if you take illegal drugs, I think you should be accountable for what you take. And if you did something that you shouldn't do, you should be accounted for that and not get away with it.
Many violent offenders who employ this neat legal trick don't spend a day in prison or even in a psychiatric hospital. By the age of 30, Clay Hatch is an experienced drug user, injecting amphetamines twice a week and topping it up with ecstasy and alcohol. One evening, Hatch walks into this Gold Coast service station armed with a knife.
Hey mate, give me the money, I'll stab her. Come on, asshole! I'm not kidding! Give me the money or she dies!
Hatch makes off with $794 in cash, which he spends buying more drugs. The next night, he comes back to the same service station. But this time, he's armed with an even more deadly weapon.
Right, give me the money or you're dead. Don't stuff around this time. Come on, fill it up!
I was walking in as he was walking out,
And he stood in his black floppy hat and he just turned and said, too easy, and just walked past here, down there.
Hatch takes off with $985. But he's not finished yet. The next morning, armed with the rifle and thinking clearly enough to wear a balaclava so he can't be identified on security cameras, he walks into a bank.
Move it!
When a customer bravely tries to intervene, Hatch fells him with a single blow. Hatch flees the bank, leaving behind more shattered victims. As police converge, he abandons his getaway car.
431 urgent, he's crossing towards the Gold Coast Turf Club.
Within minutes, he's caught by police, still carrying the gun and the sack full of cash.
I'm going crazy.
Clay Hatch now claims he committed this string of violent robberies while he was in a drug-induced psychosis. He says he believed he was being controlled by Satan, that the devil made him do it. Well, the Mental Health Tribunal agreed and found him not guilty on the grounds of mental illness. Should Clay Hatch have been found not guilty on the grounds of mental illness?
Well, in my view, the decision was flawed. No, he should not have been found of unsound mind. These people are not, in the absence of ongoing drug use, mentally ill. That's our problem.
So, what happened to this man who was so psychotic he could not stand trial? Well, believe it or not, he was simply released back into the community. So he walked free.
If you have a drug use disorder which is resolved by the time you get to court, there's no invitation to force someone into a hospital.
So what usually happens is that once you're deemed to be of sound mind again, you're released?
In general terms, yes. If you're well, you leave.
It's a loophole, isn't it?
Well, yes.
For the victims of these crimes, there is no such release. Too afraid to go out, Maria Gallows spends her days inside her parents' home.
I have lost all my independence. I can't even walk out the front door alone. I can't physically do anything I could do before. I can't drive. I don't know if I'll be able to go back to work. And yeah, it's really upsetting.
The life that you used to know is gone?
Used to know, it's gone. I used to be a very daredevil person, did skydiving, and that's completely wiped off the list now.
It's hard for this once vibrant, confident young woman to accept that her life will never be the same. That every day means a struggle to put her broken body back together. As for her attacker, well, he's fared rather better than Maria. His case is reviewed every 6 months. He may be released any day. But because of the extraordinary secrecy provisions surrounding the Mental Health Review Tribunal, the public will never be told. For her part, Maria just wants to hear Lomas take responsibility for what he's done. No excuses for Graham Lomas.
I don't think, not only for Graham, I don't think there's anyone to harm others and get away with it.
And plead, the drugs made me do it.
And plead, drugs have made me do it. Because, no, the drugs didn't make you do it, you did it.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.